The Haftarah for Parashas Vayetze is a Haftarah we almost never read because of Hanukkah. But there is the famous story of Mishpat Shloimo. From Melachim Aleph Perek Gimel. And in short, two women lived in the same house and they had babies 2 or 3 days apart. At night, one of the ladies rolled over her baby, crushed him, and killed him. She got up in the middle of the night. She took the other baby, the baby who was alive from her friend, and she gave her instead the dead baby. In the morning, the other woman gets up and she sees a dead baby. She's about to nurse and she sees her baby is dead. And she looks at this is not my baby. This is not my baby. And both women go to Shlomo HaMelech and each one of them claims, the baby who's alive, that's mine. The dead one is yours. Since there are no proofs, no witnesses, not even cameras, Shlomo HaMelech asked for a sword. And he decreed, cut him in two. Give one half to this woman and the other to the other woman. And the real mother feels compassion over her baby. And she says, oh, don't do that. You know what? Give my baby to the other woman, as long as you don't kill him. The other lady says, no, I shouldn't have him. And you shouldn't have him either. Split him up, as the king said. Cut him in two. Shlomo immediately understood who is the real mother because of her love and compassion towards her kid. And he instructed to give that woman who prevented the killing the baby. The whole nation heard about this, the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech, and they were so impressed. They saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him. So we know this story, and this is how we normally understand it, but we have to go today behind the scenes and understand what really happened there. And make some great revelations. Major questions arise from this question, from this story. Who's the mother that actually spoke the truth? The one who sued or the one who was sued? What exactly happened here? Kidnapping of a baby? Or just a plot? Why didn't Shlomo HaMelech use the halachic concept of Amoitzi mechaver olav haraya? If you want to take something from my hands, the burden of proof is on you. So the mother that is holding the baby who's alive, seemingly should be the real mother, and the other party should bring proofs if they want to say that it's theirs. We only say yachloiku, split it in two, when they're both holding on to it, like the beginning of Bab Mitzvah. Two people are holding on to a garment. Shnayim oichazim betalis. And why are we so impressed? And why were they all impressed back then from what Shlomo HaMelech did? In fact, the Radbaz brings in Shal Tshuvos Chelek Gimel Siman Taf Reish Lamed Daled that he was asked, what's the great wisdom in Shlomo HaMelech doing this? He found a way out. Beautiful strategy. And this is 500 years ago. And the Radbaz says, some people in our time can do things like this and others. So why is it so impressive? Also, the way the mother of the dead baby behaved is very strange. The Shemen Rokech asks, she switched the babies. What was she thinking? You're stealing somebody else's baby. So now you have a lot of expenses and you have to spend a lot of time raising somebody else's kid. But it's not your seed. And more, you suffered a tragedy. Really terrible. Your baby is dead. You gonna get any comfort from the fact that you stole somebody else's baby? How is that gonna help? And for every answer we're gonna give, we should ask if she really did have a reason for asking this kid, I want to raise him. Why is it that suddenly she changes her mind? When the other mother says, no, don't cut him in two. Give it to her. She refuses. And she says, no, let's do what Shlomo HaMelech said. Let's cut him in two. Why are you changing your mind suddenly? What's wrong with you? The answer to this is in Medrash Rabbah and Koheles. Koheles Rabbah Parasha Yud. Rabbanan Amrei Yevamos Hayu. These were two women that their husbands died. And they left them with, now there's only one son. So the one who has the son who's alive doesn't need Yibum. The one whose son died within 30 days of his birth is called a Nefel. She needs Yibum. These women wanted to make sure they don't have Yibum. Maybe because the Yavam was very young and they would need to wait for many years or for any other reason. So it came out they didn't exactly fight for the skin. They fought for trying to avoid the need to have Yibum. Understanding what these women are claiming is explains to us how suddenly this lady changes her mind. The lady, the mother of the dead baby. Initially she said, the son who's alive, that's mine, because she wants to get out of Yibum. If she has a son, she doesn't need Yibum. But when she hears what the king rules, that you have to kill the baby, she says, oh, this is great. This is great. First of all, I won't have to do Yibum, either because we'll say this happened after more than 30 days from birth, or they're going to execute him after 30 days. Or maybe she held that killing a baby is not like a baby dying on his own. It's not, doesn't have the halachic status of an effort. So she says, this is great. This is even better for me than just having the kid, because this way I don't have to have Yibum, and I won't have to raise somebody who's not mine, a kid who's not mine. Comes out a great chiddush. Not only the fact that she said, Shlomo Melech, I like what you're saying. Let's kill this baby. The fact that she changed her mind, she changed her position. Initially she wanted to have this baby, but now when they give it to her, she refuses. That is the proof. She only switched these kids because she wanted to avoid having Yibum. That's one way to look at it. But the Rishonim bring a different case in the name of the Medrash. These two women were a Kala and her mother-in-law. Chazal tell us in Yevamos Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, a Kala and her mother-in-law as from those 5 women who they have a chazaka. They ate each other. It's the mother-in-law, it's the daughter of the mother-in-law, it's Tsarasa, the other wife, married to the same husband, the Yevama, and the daughter of one's husband from a different woman. And according to him, according to the Rishonim, this is what happened. The Kala, the mother of the dead baby, needed to wait 13 years until the other son, who is the son of her mother-in-law and the brother of her husband, will grow up, become bar mitzvah, and will be able to do Yibum. She doesn't want to be a guna for such a long time, and therefore she switches between the babies, and she exempts herself from Yibum for 2 reasons. First of all, I have a son who's alive, and my husband doesn't have a brother. That is what the Meiri says in Yevamos Yud Zayin Amud Beis. That's a tremendous chiddush. Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shu'ib, the Talmid of the Rashba, writes the same thing in his drashos in the name of some of the midrashim. Comes the Shemen Rokeach and combines these 2 ideas, a 2 Yevamos, or it's a Kala and her mother-in-law. And according to him, this is what happened. There was a woman who was married to, let's say, Reuven, and they had a son whose name is Chanoch. He goes and he marries another wife. Comes out that the wife of Reuven is the mother-in-law of the wife of Chanoch. Later, Chanoch dies, the husband of the Kala. And later, Reuven, his father, dies. And he leaves a brother, whose name is Shimon. Before Reuven and Chanoch died, they actually had, their wives had kids. First, the wife of Reuven had a kid, and then the wife of Chanoch. After these 2 men died, the son of the Kala died as well. So she needs Yibum from the kid of her mother-in-law. But her mother-in-law is exempt from Yibum because her son is still alive. Comes the Kala and switches the babies in order to exempt herself also from Yibum. And the mother-in-law is still going to be exempt from Yibum because she has a grandson from her husband. The Shemen Rokeach tries to figure out what exactly were the Svaros were they thinking, the Kala and her mother-in-law. When the Kala agreed to the Psak of Shlomo HaMelech, was because she wanted to exempt herself from Yibum and also not to raise a kid who is not hers. At the end, Shemen Rokeach says a remarkable chiddush. The Gzar Din, the sentence of Shlomo HaMelech, that this baby who's alive will be considered like the son of the mother-in-law, regarding that the Kala requires Yibum. However, the Kala is going to be the one in charge to raise him. Why? Punishment. You wanted to kill this baby in order to be exempt from raising him. So guess what? So now you have to raise him. However, Rabbi Yehuda Chosid, in Moshav Skenim al Torah, totally different scenario. And he says it has nothing to do with Yibum. These 2 women were in a bitter fight over a very, very large inheritance. Those days, it was accepted that a person who dies, and he has little kids, so the wife takes her ksuba, and for the rest of the money, she becomes the apotropos. She becomes the one in charge until the kids grow up. These 2 women were married to one person, very, very rich husband. He died, and he left tremendous amounts of money. If these 2 kids would be alive, each one of them would take half of the Yerusha for her son. But now that there's only 1 kid, they weren't fighting over who's this kid belong to. They were fighting who's going to be in charge of all the money left. Comes Shlomo HaMelech and says, since The halacha is mamun namut al besafek. When you have a mamun which we're in doubt, we split it choilkin. Therefore, we'll split the kid and we'll split the money between these two women. Rabbi Chosid adds more and he tells us what exactly was the claim of the mother of the dead baby. That suddenly she prefers that her baby will be split up in two and instead of receiving it alive. So he explains. She says to the other mother, "You're cheating. People will say that you're the mother. And also, I know that he's my son, and you also know that. You admit it to me, but I don't want people to think that I'm after the money. And I'm lying. So since we have a suffix, let's do what the Torah says when there's a suffix. Let's split it in half." Most of the Mefarshim see it as the one who is suing, the mother who is suing, she's the one speaking the truth. And the fact that she switched ladies in the middle of the night, it was true. If that's the case, why is it that they took out the baby from the chazaka? The woman who's holding on to it, she is the muhzak. It's in her possession. If you want to take something out of my possession, the burden of proof is on you. The answer is in the Rosh. Shalosh Tshuvas Rosh in Klal Kuf Zayin. Oisvav, and he says, when you have an umdana demuchach, when it's so clear to you, it has koyach to take out of the hands of the chazaka. And that is what Shlomo Melech did, he says, and we find it many times that Chachamim paskin like that in the Gemara. The Abarbanel says, what caused this umdana demuchach? What caused Shlomo Melech to make it so clear to him that this is the right way? This is the right mother. This is the one who killed. How did he know? Because when he heard that one mother crushed her kid, he says, "Oh, she probably has the mazal of ma'adim." Ma'adim, that refers to blood. That refers to killing, tendency for blood. And when he saw that this suspected woman says, "Okay, split him up, cut him in two," she says, "Oh, for sure, she is from ma'adim," and therefore she prefers the sword and cutting up the kid, and that shows that she is the one who killed him. The Radbaz, Simen Tafresh Lamedal, which we pointed to earlier, he has more reasons why Shlomo Melech knew that this is the one who killed. Shlomo Melech looked at the kid's face and said, "Well, he looks just like this mother. Oh, it's definitely the right one." He looked at the dead baby and said, "This looks just like the one who is holding on now to the baby who's alive." So he understood that they're lying. And more, he saw that the lady who did not kill her baby is very agile. She's quick. She can be careful not to crush her baby, as opposed to the other woman. And therefore he said, it must be that this woman killed her son. However, says the Radbaz, the Meikar Adin, the woman who's holding her baby, the other is a person's baby, she lost the chazaka at the time that she said, "I agree that they will kill my kid." The Rif, Rabbi Shaya Pinto, on the En Yaakov, in his sefer Kesef Nivcha, he writes a different svara why there's no chazaka to the woman who's holding on to the kid, because of the concept called hadin she'apeh asar or apeh shehitir. The first one is a chazaka. Everybody knows that she has a kid. The second one, people didn't know. There was nobody living in that house with them. The only one who knows about it is the other woman. Umipia hayachai. The peh, that mouth that said that she had another kid, is also the peh, also the mouth that said that she lied down on it and she killed him. If that's the case, the second one doesn't have a chazaka. So the only chazaka is to the person who we know has a chazaka to have a baby. The kliyaka, not the famous kliyaka from the Perush of the Torah, rather Reb Shmuel Laniado, he maintains that these women didn't have a chazaka holding the baby because the one who was suing said something very smart. She said, "Ani ve'ha'isha azos yoishvos bebayis echad." We both were sitting in the same house. In other words, we both have a chazaka equally in the place, and no one has more of a chazaka on this baby than the other. The Netziv writes, a great chiddush, in his Sefer Hamek Shala. He writes, at that time, Shlomo Melech invented a new halacha with his spirit of Chochma Satorah, the halacha of Koifin al Midas Sodom. Since one of the mothers agreed that they should cut up the baby, so anyways, you're not getting a live baby, so what's the difference to you if we give it to someone else? And that is the concept of Koifin al Midas Sodom. However, even though most Mefarshim hold that this lady that sued is the one who's speaking the truth. Comes the Malbim in his Sefer Lev Menachem, and he says, no, the one who was sued, she is the one who's saying the truth, and he is medayek it from what she's saying. He says there's a rule. A person always says the most important thing, and then he says the secondary thing. The ikar first, what's important to him, and then the tafel. So let's analyze it. The woman who said b'ni hachai first says my son is the one who's alive. More important to her is that her son is alive and she should have it. The other woman says first b'nei chames, no, your son is the one who's dead, and then she says the other son is mine and he's alive. So all she's interested is the dead person, which means that's not the ikar. Would be ikar to her, which means we go after the person who said b'ni achai. She first says my son is alive, and she is the one saying the truth. And similarly, writes the Chida in Choimas Anach. Baal HaKedah, he says Shlomo Melech had the proof that the one who's suing is right, because he says he had a special spirit from above to see it clear. The taina of the one who is suing is a very strong claim. Why is it that a woman will want to nurse and raise somebody who's not her son, somebody else's son? Why should you want to toil? At the end, it's not even her seed. But it's hard to understand what he says. Why should we believe the one who's suing more so than the one who is being sued? Because the fact that she wants to continue raising this kid, that also proves that lichora, that is her kid. More than that, her whole taina, her whole claim is built on the fact that the one who's being sued wanted to raise the son of her friend. And therefore she took away the son who's alive. If that's the case, and a woman doesn't want to raise her friend's son, so the chazaka of the one who's being sued gets even stronger. That's what the Kli Yakar asks on that. Mishbetzot Zav, he brings a different proof to the chazaka of the one who's suing. He says a big proof that she is right from what at the end Shlomo HaMelech says in his psak. Vayomer HaMelech Tnu la et hayelud achai ve'ames lo temitu. Give her the baby who's alive and don't kill him. What's going on here? If the one who's being sued is the real mother, why do you have to give the baby to her? She is holding on to it. Should have said hanichu hayeled etzlav. Just leave him. Leave him by her. Why do you say that you gave it to her? You want to give it to her? It doesn't say anywhere in those psukim that they already took the baby out of her hands and the slaves of Shlomo HaMelech were holding on to it. So why do you need the words tenula? Give it to her. However, this is also hard to understand what he says, because the language of the psukim over there is v'tomer ha'isha asher b'na achai. The woman whose son is alive said to the king, because she felt compassion over her son. But she said, tenula es hayeled achai. Give it to the other mother. Don't kill him. And the other one says, no, gam li gam lach lo yeh. I shouldn't have him, you shouldn't have him. Let's cut him up. And the king says, Tnu la es hayelod achai. And don't kill him, because she's the mother. So if the mother of the baby who's alive, and according to what he said is the one who is suing, she said, Tnu la es hayelod achai, meaning give the baby who's alive to the one who's being sued. If that's the case, if the one who's being sued receives the baby, it's shayach to say tenula, because if it wasn't, in fact, in her hands, if the baby wasn't in her hands, or it's not really an Indian of giving, it's a giving of the deen, of the judgment, of the decree, and therefore there's no problem for the king to say, give it to her. More than that, the real mother says tenula, so the king just uses the same expression, the same wording, and he says as well tenula. Some want to prove the other way, that the one who's being sued is the one who is right, because the one who sues said a story that cannot be proven. How do you know that's what happened? Maybe the kid had a heart attack. How do you know she crushed him? So it must be that that's really what happened by the one who's suing, and she's the one who killed her own baby, and therefore she knows what happened, and therefore she's blaming it on someone else. But that also is hard to understand. It's not necessarily a clear proof, because maybe there were some signs on the baby that he was choked from being crushed by his mother. There was once a very famous painter who painted a picture of this Mishpat Shlomo in this sentence, and everyone who saw this is so impressed. The details, that it brought it to life. It was so amazing. But when they showed this picture to the Ger Rebbe, the Ibri Emes, he wasn't impressed. And people told him, isn't it an amazing picture painting? Why are you not impressed? And he said, I'll tell you. Shlomo HaMelech was very, very wise. The painter wasn't. He asked him why. He said, look at the painting. Who's holding the sword? One of the slaves of Shlomo in the painting is holding the sword. But that's not what the king said. The king commanded, Vayomer HaMelech, K'chu li charev. Bring the sword to me. Why did he do that? Because Shlomo HaMelech was afraid. As soon as he says, cut off the baby, if one of the slaves is going to be holding it onto the sword, he may actually go and do exactly as the king decreed. Shlomo HaMelech was the only one who knew that he's not planning to kill any baby. And therefore he said, K'chu li charev, I want to hold the sword. We conclude with a great musar that stems out of this meiser that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz pointed. Sichos Musar Vayetze Tafshin Lamed Gimel, and Reb Chaim Shmulevitz asked, how did Shlomo Melech relied on his wisdom to say, cut up this baby? So it's clear that the real mother is not going to want this, and she's going to be willing to give up her baby because she loves him. But how do you know for sure that the other lady will agree? She is cruel, but who says she's going to be willing to kill a baby? And she wants to steal the baby to raise the baby. Seemingly, she wants to help this baby. So how are you so sure, Shlomo HaMelech? Said Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, this was the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech that he knew that when a person is in a matzav of nefila, he's deteriorating, he's sinning. At that time, he can go deeper and deeper to the lowest point. And he was sure that if she stole a baby, she'd also be willing to cut up and kill a baby. From the depth of stealing the baby, he deteriorated further to be willing to kill a baby. How careful we have to be, because this musa applies to each and every one of us.